Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tales from a Professional Nerd. My name is Bryan C.P. Steele, and I will be your nerd today, and every other day that you watch my little show here on YouTube. Or our sister show, The Arcane Promise, which is the Spelljammer 5e D&D game that I play with a bunch of my industry friends, and we record it so you can laugh with us and eventually, bite your teeth or bite your nails in frustration with the craziness that ensues over there. So this is episode 57. I've been doing this for well over a year now, every week, as often as possible anyway. Sometimes missing because of illness and the like. But it's been a wild ride. It's been great. If you've been with us a while, you know that the first thing I like to do is take a step and do the week in Bryan, basically explaining kind of like how things have been over the last couple, and then we get into the topic at large. I'm not going to spend too much time on the week in Bryan because although it has been a great week, I really want to spend as much time as I can talking on the topic today, because it's been a really cool thing. I don't know if you've been. You know what? I'll get to that in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. First off, I would like to apologize if there is a slight hum to the video. It's because I have a fan going right now. It is stinking hot in my studio right now. I'm getting my air conditioning serviced tomorrow, and the Midwest is seeing a little bit of a heat spike at the moment, so it's kind of gross here in Bryan studio land. So I've got a fan running, but it's a quiet fan. Hopefully it's not like making this giant wind noise or anything on the microphone that I'll be kicking myself about later. But I did want to just apologize if there is a slight hum in the back or someone's picking up on that. Alright, so first things, so the week in Bryan. Let's see, what did we put up another Arcane Promise episode, particularly a good episode with a funny title that was brought on by a one particular moment in the game called Grubs, Grubs, Grubs. You gotta watch to find out what that means. And I also had a chance to last week got the to fully experience a role-playing game session under Peter Atkinson of Gen Con fame in his World of Chaldea genre, his setting. I can't even really call it just a game setting because it's movie and comic, and eventually he wants to do role-playing stuff with it, and right now we're just playing in his world using the Burning Wheel system, but it was the first time we got to really sink our teeth into our characters, and I had a blast. I'm super looking forward to playing again next week. My character is we are getting the benefit of being able to flesh out the kind of Welsh Irish area of his universe of Chaldea. So he's got this place on the map called Dorsung that is this island that is kind of this old school Irish Gaelic Celtic kind of throwback land. And he's got it worked into his system, but he had not, or into his story, but he had not really crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And it's up to us as the kind of the first people playing in his world to help him flesh that out. And we're having a blast. We're having a great time. I am a fey-blooded kind of backwoods nobleman who wants nothing more than to return the island to the rightful owners, the original fey folk. And my character had a chance to do the unthinkable. I somewhat befriended a Fomorian, this kind of fairy giant that's hanging around the rest of these people, and it's a mystery, and I thought it'd be neat to unravel this mystery and maybe even just befriend this other kind of fey creature. And it worked, except that he offered me a drink of something that the human part of me screamed, "Hey, don't drink this, that's bad for you." And the fairy part of me was like, if you can survive this, if you can keep this down, this will bring you one step closer to seeing the other side and unlocking your true potential. And the dice betrayed me, and I took a big swig of it, tried to keep it down, and then had to run out of the courtroom and throw up in the bushes. Luckily for me, the Fomorian thought it was funny, not rude, and it sounds like I still have made a friend, even though I didn't get the direct benefit of drinking this giant mead or whatever it was. But it was a great time. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and although we're not recording it, I did take a quick snapshot just to kind of show how much fun we were having. So I'll throw that up here. So yeah, we were just it's a small game, but it was super fun. But yeah, that's pretty much all I did. That and work. I worked a lot with. I did a lot of writing in my Shadowrun novel. I've got some decent headway on some Warzone stuff, and officially I started looking for start kind of setting bait out in the water for writers to help us with the new Spycraft later this year. So good times all around. Again, it's we're stuck indoors, and it kind of sucks to have to deal with the heat and not being able to just run over to my friend's house and play a board game, but things are moving forward in the right direction, and so I can't complain. On a family level, found out my son got on the presidential education society thing, basically top percentage, blah blah blah. He did really good at the end of 5th grade, so super excited for him for that. They are now the kids are officially done with their at-home computer schooling for the summer. We'll see how the fall comes together with this whole virus thing, if it comes back, or what are they changing? Who knows what's going on? I'm trying not to think about it, not trying to not let it bother me, just basically looking forward to hopefully things getting back to close to normal again. The other big thing that happened this week is actually it ties directly into today's topic. So a couple weeks ago I mentioned that they did a big teaser for what we thought was just going to be a big Necron teaser, and I did a Necron hobby day because I was so jazzed about doing about the Necrons. Well, it turns out that was actually not just a teaser for new Necron stuff, which there was a ton of new Necron stuff teased. It was also a teaser for 9th edition Warhammer 40k, and I know that sounds like a lot for people who have not. A lot of you, if you're role players, you're like, man, D&D 5 is here, and that's been going on for 50 years, and 40k is going into its 9th edition. What the heck? Miniature games go through editions a little faster because as the game grows and evolves, the players end up finding loopholes, figuring out weaknesses in the system, figuring out things that the game system can't handle that maybe it should, and it just evolves. And game companies need to do those new additions. They need to do updates to their rules and updates to their game systems in order for them to survive, in order for them to make money. This is not even a matter of, I don't want to be. I think I did an episode on the Edition Wars a long time ago. Last year, and I don't remember what episode it was, but I did the Edition Wars talking about, is it okay to go through the editions, and should you stay loyal to the old ones, or should you go to the new ones? Basically, for me, the end of the day is you want to try and support the most recent edition that you can, because that's what's keeping the company afloat. That's what's paying their bills. That's what's paying their employees. That's what's giving them the capital and the assets to make more cool stuff for you to get and forge forward with that game. So this is no exception. So we've watched a couple of videos. We got to see a couple of Q&As with some of the designers from Games Workshop to discuss some of the things that are going to happen to 9th edition, in an effort to hopefully get people excited to play this new version of their favorite game. And what that did for me is that made me kind of want to take a day, and everybody and their brothers, talking about 9th edition and, the rumors and what we do know and what we've been told, and, kind of some speculations and things. And I kind of wanted to join in on that. I was like, you know what, as a game industry fellow and a follower of 40K stuff for many, 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 many moons, I wanted to weigh in a little bit, and maybe talk a little about what I would like to see out of 9th edition, or my opinions on some of the things. And if you're not a 40K fan, or if you're not really into miniatures games, maybe this particular chapter in the Tales from a Professional Nerd isn't for you, but I guarantee I'm going to probably tell some funny stories and give you a little more insight into my views when it comes to gaming in general, because of some of these things that are supposedly happening with 9th edition. They do raise questions, and they do raise opinions of mine that hopefully are either that I will fall on the right side of, the yes or no when it comes to playing the game. Because frankly, and I'm going to tell you a little bit, 40K background in a minute, but frankly, 8th edition, which has been going for the last 3 years, I think 3 or 4 years, hasn't really been for me. I played a couple of games right when it came out. I got a feel for how the game functioned. And then I kind of watched from the sidelines a little bit as new rules came out, new codexes came out, new units came out, and I didn't necessarily care for the direction that things were going. And the couple of times that I played the game in 8th edition, I had a very hard time setting aside my game designer hat, and I found a lot of weaknesses in the 8th edition rule set that were very bent. They made certain armies and army lists nigh obsolete, and it made for some pretty unfun situations that kind of pushed me away from 40K. Not that it wasn't that I quit completely, like, 40K. It was just more along the lines of I didn't feel like spending those couple of hours being frustrated at a game system that I felt could be better. And I would rather spend that time playing games that I felt were as good as they needed to be, or were just downright fun, and I didn't have any direct complaints with, or major ones anyway. Every game designer, when they play a game, they immediately, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise, they sit down, they play that game, and the first thing they think of in the back of their head is, what can I do? What would I do to make this better, or to fix X problem, or whatever. We all do it, and if you don't, you're a better person than me, or get a better game designer than me. And if you find a game that you can't figure out like a way to, like, even just like a little in the back of your head house rule, then you're probably playing a fantastic game, which is awesome. It's a good sign. Let's see. I wanted to give you just kind of a background of why 40K is important to me and why I wanted to do this episode. 40K, Warhammer 40,000, which originally started out as a very, very small skirmish style, just a handful of figures per side style of game, based out of a big, thick book called The Rogue Trader. That was my first taste of 40K. I picked up the Rogue Trader book at Valparaiso Pet and Hobby, a pet store that also had hobby stuff. And honestly, I picked it up just because it had some cool painted minis on the front that I had not seen before, and I was painting miniatures for role-playing games because of my stepbrother. And I looked through this book and I read a lot of the history, and I was like, man, this is really cool stuff. And I never actually played a game with Rogue Trader, maybe once or twice, but I can't remember playing. And this is back in the early 90s, like 91, 92, I think is when I picked that book up. It was definitely before I could drive. And shortly thereafter, a gentleman that worked at our local comic book shop took me and a few of my friends to a local, just slightly off the beaten track, called like Three Rivers Con or River Rat Con or something, that was basically just a hotel room filled with people playing games, like a hotel ballroom. And at that place, they had one huge game of 40K going on at the far end, and they were quote unquote using the new rules. And I didn't understand what that meant, but it was the first time it was like Warhammer 40K, the second edition, basically the first time they stepped away from Rogue Trader and started making it into a proper war game. And I remember walking up to the table and just seeing piles of what looked like, Geiger aliens and big tanks and all these things that were not in the Rogue Trader book. The Rogue Trader book is the one that the famous one that has the deodorant hover tank. That they had rules for how to build that. Rules for beastmen with plasma guns. That sort of thing. And then I get to this table and it's like legitimate like squads of Space Marines and Imperial Guard versus these hordes of bugs, and a handful of Zotes, which are cool. These like lizard centaur guys with broccoli hair, that I just fell in love with. And so my very first purchase for Warhammer 40K, the proper outside of Rogue Trader, was I went to that con and I saw there was a guy selling a board game called Tyranid Attack or Tyranid Assault. I couldn't remember. It's either Tyranid Assault or Tyranid Attack. It's an old school board game, which was a successor to Space Hulk. Space Hulk being a board game where you're a group of these big, heavily armored Space Marines walking through a broken ship that has been eaten alive by Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers are basically Geiger aliens. And they made another board game called this Tyranid Assault or Tyranid Attack. I think it's Tyranid Assault. They made this other board game that was, instead of a handful of like heavily armed and armored Space Marine Terminators on a ship filled with little bugs, it was a handful of Space Marine scouts. Like, these guys barely wear armor, on a hive ship, a living ship filled with actual Tyranids. Tyranids are like the bosses of the aliens. Like, there's these big like biomorph alien lizard things. And at that time, they looked a lot like big, like, red fire ants, but with swords and guns. And I fell in love with it immediately. I was like, oh my god, this game is fantastic. We sat in and played a couple of, like, threw some dice back and forth, shot some people up, and it was like, all right, me and my buddies, we were like, we are definitely playing this game. And we went back to Ian's house, and we dedicated a table. We started building terrain. We dedicated an entire room of his garage to our 40K collection. And it was just piles of models on shelves and boxes of terrain and this giant board, and we would play 4 or 5 games in like a Saturday Sunday, and go until basically we'd play until the sun came up all night long, and then go to the truck stop and grab food, and then come back and finish our game. 40K was the answer, and we had played some BattleTech. We had played a couple of things that were more like grids and squares and hexes and more mathematics. This was the first time that we really got into a game that was like tape measures and choices, and I get to choose where I move. I don't have to move like a specific way in a path or on a board. And we just dove in and loved this game. And for years, all the way through college, we would get together and play. Like, we would travel to go to tournaments, go to stores where as when we went to our various colleges, we would bring our armies to each other's colleges and play there at their local stores or in tournaments that are there. We would play at conventions. It was a huge deal. And over the course of time, we've all had dozens of armies. At this point, I've bought, assembled, painted, and sold probably 15 armies. But one has always stayed with me, and that were my Necrons. My Necrons, I hung on to them for the longest until there was an edition of 40K, and I can't remember if it was 3rd or 4th edition. They all kind of blend together. That the rules changes were so dramatic, and because the Necrons do not have, at that time, they did not have an actual traditional vehicle. The game had moved into it was very much a game about who has the most little cars. Your dudes were less important, and that's how the rules were bent. It's that edition was the vehicle edition, and I had so little fun, and I was so upset with how drastically they had changed the game that I sold my couple of hundred Necron models and was like, I'm done with 40K. I've got these other games. I got very heavy into role-playing games. I've got these other games that are taking up all of my time. And so I shunted them aside and was done with them for a little while, until the Dawn of War 2 40K video game came out. And I remember playing, I was very distinctly remembering, I was over at my friend Matt's house, and he was like, hey, I've got this new 40K video game. It's really cool. You should play it. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I sat down and gave it a try on his computer. And when I went to go pick a force, Necrons were an option. And I was like, oh, sweet, I can play Necrons. And he goes, oh, that'd be cool. And I clicked on them. And when I clicked on them, and there were all of these other options, and vehicles, and destroyers. Multiple types of destroyers. Immortals? Okay, those are cooler looking than they were. What's a pariah? Like, I just went, and wraiths? What's a wraith? This thing is just, like, ghostly. I immediately fell in love with my Necrons again. And Matt had told me, basically I was like, oh my god, this video game is so cool. And Matt was like, well, yeah, but everything in this video game, with very few exceptions, are currently in the Necron Codex. They're currently models available. And it was that statement that made me go to my local game store, buy a Necron Codex, and immediately start buying models. I was like, you know what? I'm getting back into it. And I started small, started feeling my way around the new set of rules, because apparently there had been an edition change or two that I was unaware of. And I dove back in head first. And so now, years later, I'm sitting on, I think we estimated it close to around 10,000 points of painted Necrons. As soon as I have one more shipment coming in, with the exception of special characters, I have every single Necron model that they have offered, aside from the originals that I no longer have, which is sad, because I actually kind of wish that I had those lying around just for kind of nostalgia's sake. But my Necrons have, over the course of the years, I had my Blood Angels come and go. I had Carcharodons, the Space Sharks, they came and went. I even had a giant Khorne army, the Chaos army, and it came and went. I basically would fall in love with models, paint them, assemble them, play them for a while, and then sell them for a profit. But I never did that with my Necrons. I hung on to them for the longest time. And then 8th edition came around, and I sort of fell out of the circuit because I wasn't really happy with how things were. And then we got a new codex. And it had it had a great new fluff in it, great new stories. It was a great read. But game-wise, it didn't really pack a lot of punch when it came to anything new. They didn't really give us anything fancy. Forge World gave us a couple of cool new models to play along with them. They're expensive, but all right, that's fine. But it wasn't the wow, jazz, pow that would bring me back heavy into 40K. Now, this new release schedule movie thing, like the trailer is all filled with awesome Necron graphics and new Necron monsters that are fantastic looking. They of course leaked a picture of just this field full of new Necron stuff. My next year or two are gonna be expensive. I'm gonna be filling out a lot of very cool stuff with my Necrons, but it has got me very excited again to play, which says a lot. It says that GW is listening. They've gotten my attention, and I'm happy to try and throw down again on the table. Will I show up to very many tournaments? Probably not. Tournament scene tends to frustrate me because it brings the worst out in a lot of gamers. But I can't wait to throw some dice with some of my friends again for multiple reasons. But that is what brought around this. I know it's a very long, rambly story, but that's what brought us around today to why I wanted to do a 9th edition breakdown of what we know so far, my opinions on that sort of thing, because it's a new, fresh world out there, and it's possible that here in the next couple of weeks, when maybe these become available, pre-orders, whatever, it could be a big thing that happens in your local store. You might hear people talking about it, and you go, "Hey, I on Bryan's YouTube show, he was talking about this." So yeah, basically, there's a lot of stuff that was hinted at their Q&A, or not at the Q&A, at their community kind of barf, where they just kind of told everybody stuff. And then a couple of days later, they did a Q&A, and they expanded on a few things. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of little things that people won't notice that'll kind of reveal over time, or it'll show up, or the edition comes out, and people will go, gasp, oh, that's crazy, But I wrote down kind of the main things that we knew. I just wanted to go through, in no particular order, what I felt about these, my feelings about what we know so far. The big thing that I complained a lot about in 8th edition is terrain. I thought the terrain was utterly lackluster. In a war game, terrain should be very important. It should be part of your tactical choices to move around them, move through them, take them, hold them, or in some cases blow them up, that sort of thing. And in 8th edition, it really did feel that terrain was worthless. It gave you, if you had cover from terrain, it gave you a +1 to your armor save. Woo! On a D6 based system, that is nothing, because most of the weapons in the game get rid of a -1, so it's a wash. They needed to do more. Terrain needed to and needs to do more on a tactical level. Now, what it sounds like they're revamping terrain, so it's going to be there's going to be more ways for you to use it to hide your troops, to keep things hidden and not shot to pieces before they ever get to where they need to go. Whether it's getting to a mission objective, or getting into close combat, or even just getting away from an enemy when you're on your last wound, that kind of thing. And that's huge, because before, it was almost, go hiding by terrain was like all I'm doing is delaying the inevitable. And now it sounds like, you know, they're gonna make it so terrain can actually be used like it should, like, you know, bunkers on a paintball field. You know, you actually are getting behind them, staying behind them, trying not to get your face blasted off. That's an important thing for me. So seeing what the terrain rules are and seeing that they're going to be more applicable for people to use them in game as a strategy and not just a speed bump. That's awesome. Big ups for terrain changes. It's one of the things that I've been complaining about since 8th came out. Let's see what's next. They are changing the way blast weapons work. So blast weapons or area of effect weapons in 40K used to use a template, like a piece of cardboard or paper or plastic or acrylic or something that was, okay, every model that's found underneath, when I shoot, I place this in a spot, and every model that's underneath there, it takes a hit or whatever. Well, in 8th edition, they got rid of that for a more mathematical solution, where instead of laying a template down and hitting the actual physical number of models, it was, if this weapon hits that squad, it does X number of random hits, you know, 2d6 plus 2 or d3 plus 1 or whatever. And that was to show the, you know, explosion hitting multiple guys, or the area of effect hitting multiple guys. But bad dice in that situation can turn a battle, you know, where you've got weapons that are designed to clear the field of cannon fodder quickly. Bad dice could make it so, okay, I'm shooting this giant cannon that can level a house into a crowd of 50 dudes and I kill 2 guys. That's silly. So it sounds like they've changed it that blast weapons will now, is at least our first impression is, it sounds like whatever the randomizer is, if you are hitting a large enough squad, a large enough target, that you just straight up do your max number of hits, which for some weapons that's going to be immense, that's going to be huge, and that's going to be awesome. And the way that they're dictating that is they're going to call these weapons that do these max number of hits, the targets have to be a horde. Now, they have not explained what a horde is, and this is where it falls into, I hope that they're smart, and instead of being like, well, you have to have the horde key trait, because that's dumb, is that it should be based off of a number of models. Is, you know, if you've got 10, you know, between 11 and 15 models, you are considered a lesser horde. Or if it's just, if you got more than 15 models in a squad, you're a horde. You know, it can be as easy as that, because that also, if they go with a horde keyword, where it's like, oh, well, orc boys are always a horde. What if you've shot them down to 2 guys? They're a 2-guy horde? That seems really silly. So hopefully it'll just be a blanket rule that says if your unit is this big, you are a horde, and blast weapons max out when they hit you. Easy peasy. One of the other things that they've done to try and help survive, 8th edition 40K was very much about, if you get to go first and dump all of your fire into whatever their important thing is, their important thing dies. Because again, terrain really wasn't doing them any favors. So it was I believe they called it the Alpha Strike turn, and it was just, okay, what's your most important thing for your army? That thing? All right, everything I have that can see it is going to shoot it, and that has range is going to shoot it. You're going to destroy it in one turn. And not only is that demoralizing, especially if it's like a big centerpiece figure or something like that, but it's also crippling to your opponent. So it sounds like now you can put any unit you'd like into reserves. Basically, you can leave them off the field, and by spending command points, you can bring your reserve guys into the battle. They can come in from flanking or whatever. And what that's going to do is that means if you've got a very important model that doesn't otherwise have the ability to go into reserve because of a drop pod or teleporter or whatever, you can spend command points to just have that person sit out a turn or two until the game gets a little more embroiled, and then he can come out and deal with stuff. And hopefully by that point you'll either have weakened your opponent so they don't have that alpha straight capability, or you've given them enough tactical options that if they choose to have their entire army shoot at this new thing that just came out of reserves, they're also they're going to obliterate that thing, but they're also going to maybe cripple themselves because now they've got 2 or 3 other squads that have moved up into objectives or moved up into close combat, things like that. So I think being able to put anything in reserves for command point cost is awesome. In my opinion, anything that can spend command point, anything that forces you to spend anything that forces you to spend command points before the game actually begins is a plus. My opinion on command points, we'll get to those a little bit later. But I think anything that lets you make tactical decisions using them is a big thumbs up. So that's a cool thing. One of the biggest changes that it sounds like is they're making a pretty wide change to vehicles and monstrous creatures. So vehicles and monstrous creatures in 8th edition changed dramatically from 7th edition. In the way that 7th edition, they had different firing arcs for their weapons. They had an armor value that you had to punch through, and then if you got through, you got to a table to determine what happened to a vehicle. And now it is the vehicles and monstrous creatures are treated like any other model. They've got wounds and toughness and an armor save, and they're just treated like everybody else. Except that those numbers tend to be a whole lot higher because they have a lot more firepower and they get to fire more stuff, that kind of thing. But one of the things that happened, unless you had a special rule that let you do so, you were not allowed to fire your weapons from the tank or the critter or whatever if they were engaged in close combat. And what that meant is you could take a supremely minimal troop, a fast but generally useless thing that you can get in high numbers, and pile it into a vehicle, knowing that you aren't going to be able to kill it, but knowing that it doesn't have that many attacks back because it's a jeep or a tank, and you're going to lock it in place, and it's not going to be able to fire all of its mega weaponry or anything like that, and just sort of take it out of the strategy, take it out of the board, just by throwing a bunch of little dudes at it, and be like, all right, it's taken care of, we got it. And there were some that could get out of that. There were some rules that allowed people to roll out of combat, that kind of thing. But overall, it was almost a simple tactic to deal with very high point models. Well, they have openly said they're changing that. That now vehicles and monstrous creatures, when they're engaged in close combat, can still make shooting weapon attacks. Now, we don't know if they can shoot the models that they're contact with. Like, do you have to shoot the people you're in combat with? Or is it going to be more of a narrative feel? Because, again, a tank is going to have a real hard time shooting its turret down or behind at a thing that's touching its bumper, ripping out its wiring. It's going to have a hard time doing that. So maybe what it might be doing is, although that tank is getting rocked in close combat, it can fire its guns at other targets. Like one of those, I'm still playing the tactical pillbox, I'm shooting my turret over there, I'm shooting my my secondary guns over at these guys that are advancing on someone else, and I'm being attacked in close combat, and that happens, but at least I'm still a probably high point model being useful on the field instead of just getting bogged down and then being a point sink, because a lot of people just weren't using vehicles because it was too easy to bog them down and keep them from doing what they're being paid to do, so to speak. Another thing that so 40K for a very long time has allowed allies. And allies are exactly what it sounds like. I'm an army list of this, but I'm bringing over a handful of models from this other army list because we get along. Well, allies intrinsically are unfair. And I know a lot of people that are going to listen to this and be like, but it's a narrative, it makes sense. They are unfair because, narratively speaking, there are other army lists out there. There are army lists that just can't ally. Tyranids. They're a giant horde of space alien bug lizards that are here to eat all of your everything. They don't get to be like, oh, hey, let's shake hands and make friends. They could field some Gene Stealer cult stuff, but that's because Gene Stealers are half Tyranid. But for the most part, they don't have any allies. Necrons. We're undead, unliving machines that want to erase everything from existence except for us. We don't have a lot of friends. And then the other side of the coin, though, is the Imperials. They've got 22 codexes to draw from because they all serve the Imperium. They're all part of the Imperial thing. And what that does is that really makes it so certain armies do not get the benefit of being able to cross-pollinate that way, is through these allies. And allies have always been kind of a way to break the system. Well, one way that GW is fighting that in 9th Ed is it's costing you a command point to get a unit outside of your primary codex. So whatever your primary codex is, if you're a Ultramarine player and you decide, you know what, I really would like to bring a squad of Inquisition or a squad of Adeptus Custodes, you can. It's just going to cost you one of those command points that you get at the beginning of the game. It's going to cost you that to have this other unit in your squad. And like I said a minute ago, anything that forces you to spend command points to make tactical decisions, like bringing in forces from outside your normal, codex, is awesome. So more expenditures of command points before the game is a huge plus. One of the other things that they changed, and this is definitely the first time that this has happened, is they are doing an actual cap, like a modifier cap on die roll modifiers, that you can't stack up. Oh, this gives me -1, and this gives me -1, and this spell gives me -1, so I'm -3 to hit. And you only roll. You normally could only hit on a 4. Well, that's a 7, so you can't hit on a D6. That's done now. Now it is almost more like advantage and disadvantage from D&D. You can only have a +1 or a -1 to your die roll. Period. And I think that's a huge thing. That's going to make the skilled models seem that much more skilled. But more importantly, it's going to eliminate a lot of the I figured out how to make it with this spell, this spell, this spell, and this vehicle, and this special character. I'm -4 to hit, no one can touch me. That's going away. Now it's just, okay, you could have these -4s applied to you. The die only ever gets the benefit of -1, so they can still hit you. There's still a die roll, which actually brings us to a different thing. They're reintroducing the always hit on 6, and that's something that's been around for a while. It went away for 7th edition because the way the modifier system, or 8th edition, because the way the modifier system was working, there were a lot of modifiers to go forward and back. And so it was pretty rare for someone to be in a situation where a 6 wouldn't hit. Occasionally that would, like Eldar flyers, occasionally it would pop up that, oh, well, you need a 7 to hit me, you can't, and then it's just those shots are wasted. And that's gone away now. In 9th edition is a 6 always hits, a 1 always loses. So that's a big thing. It's a big benefit to armies that are less skill, more dice oriented. and it also trims down on the min-maxing, figuring out how to, if I have all of these three powers in the same shot, that stuff, you don't have to waste all your brain power on all that extra math and the points to your force on all those extra models that might only be there to give you an extra -1 or whatever. So that's going away too, which is awesome. So the big thing that I'm probably going to spend a little more time on, and I've talked to a few places already about these, is command points. I am not a fan of the command point system. The way it currently works in 8th edition, you get X number of command points based off of how your army list is built, and depending on how many individual tactical solutions you have, which I always find to be ironically funny, is that you're buying these tactical detachments, and they give you these command points, which are the exact opposite of tactics. Command points are something you spend during the game that allow you to activate individual powers or special effects or reroll mistakes. And yeah, I get it. It's a way to try and mitigate some of the randomness, but it also is, it's a gotcha thing, and I am not a fan of gotcha mechanics in wargames. Oh, you didn't realize that I had this stratagem, I'm spending these command points, ha ha ha, my army breaks all the rules. Man, you missed with that big giant gun, that sucks, I'm going to spend a command point to re-roll it. Command points take, for the most part, they take the fun out of the tactics, because someone can spend a couple of command points and your well thought out tactical plan is just run through the ringer because of an airstrike, or suddenly my target has grown wings, things like that there's no way for you to plan for. There's no way for you to be like, well, I think he might have that stratagem that turns his guy into a winged monster. You don't know that. And so command points end up being a crutch, in my opinion, a way for people to play sloppy and not think things through, because I can always spend command points and either re-roll a mistake or set up a new power combo because I've got these extra strategy points. Well, it's at least changing now that command points are just simply based, instead of based on how you build your list, which I think is maddening, because it just leads to min-maxing your way to success and Twinkie army lists that are, I'm sure the top 8 assassins in the entire Imperium are all together to fight my 500 points of Necrons. Shut up. It just led to very anti-narrative stuff. That now instead you just get a number of command points based off of the size of the game. You might have some bonuses based off of people or certain tacticians in your army or whatever. They might give you some extras, but generally speaking, both sides will have the same number of command points, and that's just based on the size of the army that you're playing, which I think is a plus. I would rather them remove the gotcha element altogether, and have all of the command points and stuff be things that change your army at the beginning, at the pre-game, or move something around. Keep all the pre-game stuff that now your opponent has to try and adjust his tactics around, not, in the middle of the game something went wrong and I'm going to maximize the benefit I get from it because command points. So there's that on command points. Flyers, apparently, again, I like flyers, and the models look really cool, and I've always loved the idea of a plane just flying by and dropping bombs on the bad guys, or the good guys, depending on who you're playing. But it sounds like in 8th edition, a lot of people weren't using flyers because they were too easy to kill. They're paper thin as far as wounds and stuff goes, and on top of that, they're pretty hard to hit unless you really made it so it's hard to hit. There was a lot of weaponry that didn't make a lot of sense to be able to take down aircraft that are moving, but could. It sounds like the new aircraft rules are your model is probably not going to stay on the board as long as as much as it did in the past. It's not going to be this like giant circling thing of doom. But it does sound like you are probably going to have more realistic aircraft functions. Like a strafing run where the tank or the airplane is on the field for like 2 seconds, and zips by, you drop a bunch of bombs, you shoot your lasers, and then in the next turn you fly off. Again, it will make it seem like these expensive, awesome aircraft models aren't nearly as good, or aren't nearly as useful of a buy because they're only on the table for a few minutes at a time. But if their rules make sense and are cool enough, people will still do it. I mean, I've got even a super heavy flyer that is designed to drop super crazy death bombs. Hopefully, that will maintain what I want to continue doing in the future. The last two things that I want to really touch on come out of me as I don't want you to think that I am against competitive army lists. I am against people playing like jerks. I am against people wasting my time not being fun. I am against going to a store to sit down to play a game with a friend of mine who brought his beat stick tournament gotcha list, and we wait. As far as I'm concerned, you've wasted 3 hours out of my life because this was zero fun. I understand there are people out there that have fun playing that type of game, even if they're on the receiving end of it. I don't think they have as much fun as they try to let on, because I'm always hearing people bitch and complain at the tables about other people doing the same thing they're doing. But either way, one of the things in 40K throughout time, and not even 40K, any war game throughout my time as a war gamer, has been that tournament play or event play requires you to sort of have a little bit of a limit on army construction. That they have to take X number of baseline things, that they have to take at least one leader guy if they want to take grunts from that other faction. You can't take an army transport without having somebody in it. That sort of thing. And collectively, that was always normally the game helped out by saying, well, we require you to take 3 troop types, up to 2 elites, up to 2. Well, that sounds like if what the guys at Games Workshop were saying was what we're picking up on, it sounds like that's going away. That now the only army construction rule is if you take something from outside of your codex, it costs you a command point for everything that you take outside of your your codex. And I find that very weird, because again, armies should be made of mixed forces that are there to take on random events and random missions. And if you're allowed to bring an army that is nothing but heroes and vehicles, or honestly nothing but heroes, like where there are no soldiers, there are no vehicles, there are no elite forces, it's just this handful of characters, that's not going to do very well, more than likely, because it's going to be missing a lot of the teeth that the rest of your faction or the rest of your turn should be dishing out. But it's also really kind of a silly notion that these guys, these 6, 7, 8 astronauts or warriors or whatever, that they are the only thing that shows up to a battle. If you want to play a skirmish level, every character is a character, play Necromunda. Play a different type of miniatures game, that allows for that sort of thing without feeling completely ham-fisted and weird. Which brings us to the last thing that I'm going to talk about the new 40K, and that's the Crusade rules. So, as someone who's played a lot of games in a lot of places and a lot of different ways, one of the ways that gamers tend to want to try and use some of their wargame stuff, especially wargamers with a narrative mind. They're not just looking at it as numbers on a page, they're looking at it as soldiers in a story. They will tend to want to know what happens between battles. You know, can we set the table up that we ambush you at the dockyards? You know, those sorts of things. And while the regular game could allow for it, it definitely doesn't like flag wave for that type of game because it's different and mostly underwater. So what GW has done with this new 9th edition 40K rule set is they've come up with something called Crusade rules. And the Crusade rules are effectively a narrative campaign where your soldiers or your characters or your squad leaders or whatever can actually get injured, get scarred, get better over time. It is an enclosed adventure that allows for extremely narrative play. Is this Crusade style game? Low numbers, low model count. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun for the right people. What will end up being, in my opinion, if they include rules for how to adjust your characters and then give them a new power level or whatever so they can be used in regular 40K, I think that's going to be a mistake. Anytime you adjust playing pieces by what the player wants, it leaves more room for them to abuse it. But I think that it'd be a lot of fun to bring bring your characters, your squad sergeants that you've painted and kind of made up their stories in your name, for you to bring them to a 40K battlefield on these Crusade rules. And it sounds like the Crusade rules scale up. So eventually, you know, you'll have your big badass characters leading smaller squads or leading the whole army or whatever against an entire faction. And it sounds like a really neat idea. And although I don't foresee that it will get a lot of use in a lot of game stores, it'll probably be a fun read, and there will be moments that you might, you know, as a dungeon master, there will be moments that I go, man, I kind of wish this was being done as an underwater thing. You know, I wish I was doing this based off of that set of rules, but I'm not, you know, so forth and so on. So I think that it's a very cool thing, and hopefully we'll, you know, get to hear and see more about the Crusade stuff in the future from Games Workshop, and maybe through their White Dwarf magazines or whatever. But yeah, that's pretty much all we know so far, aside from some models that are being released and some opinions here and there about what people think is coming out for 9th edition. The only other thing that I can say before we get into, you know, the closing is I really, really, really wish somebody on Games Workshop staff takes their new Warhammer 40K logo. The words are 3 pixels shifted to the right. It is the tiniest bit, but it makes for the corner of the R move over the line. It leaves a gap by the W, and it makes the A in the middle off center, and it is just enough to make me crazy every time I see it. Hopefully it was a glitch during the videos, and they will fix it now that everyone and their brother has saw it and said, please fix this 3-pixel error. I'm saying it now, please fix this 3-pixel error. It'll drive me crazy for the next couple of years if every time I see the Warhammer 40K logo and go, ugh, it's crooked. That made me crazy. So yeah, those are my opinions on the new 40K. I'm sure you'll hear more about it down the road. Hopefully here pretty soon I'll start to be able to actually play some games with my friends. Maybe get that Seraptech on the field, blowing some stuff up. I'm running some Shadowrun tonight for some friends from the store. Got a couple of cool meetings tomorrow, and then we head off into next week. This is the last episode that you can leave your share, like, subscribe, comment your favorite episode in the comments to try and win my little care package that I'm putting together from Tales from a Professional Nerd care package. And I will announce that at next week's I'll announce the winner at next week's video, or on next week's video, and then we'll get it mailed out and whatnot. But I do want to say that here in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have an extra special video. I'm going to talk more about that on some other platforms soon enough, and next week I'm sure I'll talk about it. But I'm going to have a guest on the show via Zoom, where we're going to discuss some very, very cool stuff coming in the future for a project that we both love dearly. But more on that in the future. For now, just, stay cool, enjoy yourself, stay safe, have some fun, and get out there and play some games, because right now that's really what it's all about. See you next week.